It's Friday night, so you know what that means. It's another episode of the Asea 5, and we're finally all back together again. It feels good. A couple of us have been kind of MIA and rogue and traveling around and just having a great time seeing new grandchildren, granddaughter.
Yeah.
Here, my dad, been with my family for the past couple of weeks, so forgive us for being gone, but I hope you understand. But we're back and we're happy and we're excited. We got a great show for you tonight. I'm Dr. Maureen Hayes from Galveston, Texas, and I'm joined by my regulars, Jim and Ann Glenn from San Antonio, Texas. Jim is our big money man, and Ann is our beautiful nutritionist and personal trainer. And of course, you all know Dr. Lee Osler. He needs no introduction. He is our dentist extraordinaire and best-selling author, and has just, can I show it, or do you want to show it, Lee?
Go ahead.
Just come out with another book. Amazing.
Love it.
Why It Matters. You know, I do have to tell you a joke that somebody texted me and said, "Who's Wyatt?" when we were talking about it the last time we were on. I was like, not Wyatt, why it? But
I feel left out here. You're all holding up this book.
You need to order yours, Carolyn.
Amazon, I think you get it overnight on Amazon Prime, I think.
Amazon. Yeah.
There we go.
And tonight we have a fan favorite. Everybody loves it. They always wanted her to come back because we learned so much when she's on. Dr. Carolyn Hoffman from Virginia, she's been in the healthcare field for over 20 years. She's a board certified, I cannot talk tonight, board certified naturopathic physician, and also a digestive expert. And you know what, when I have a tough question, or I need to know what to do with the supplements that we have or diet changes, I call Carolyn. She is just an amazing resource for us. So let me just say, do not be calling her.
I was going to say, just give her a number out to everybody.
Carolyn's going to kill me. But she is amazing, and we love that she is so generous with her time and coming on and talking to us and teaching us all the time. I mean, she's incredible. So, Carolyn, come on and tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us a little bit about the back history, and then we'll pepper you with some questions along the way.
That sounds wonderful. Welcome everybody. I mean, this is always great to be back on the Asea 5 with all these fabulous people with so much information to share. As Maureen said, I've been in the natural health field now for kind of late 90s was really my intro to it. Fell into it only because I think a lot of people, are searching for solutions, right, when we've got issues. And I had experienced a car accident that had injured a spine. And long story short was that by the time I'd been about 5 years was struggling with that, I got told that I couldn't keep dancing and teaching. And I was the head of a ballet department for a BA degree at that point, teacher training, leadership, and that was kind of it. My career was over because they said if I kept dancing, I was really going to injure my spine even worse. Fortunately, I have to say, fortunately, they weren't able to operate on me, but which was actually a godsend in the end. But I struggled, like I know that you've talked about your level of discomfort, Jim, with your back and such like. I went through years of being in chronic pain. I didn't have a life, even though they said, well, go out and live your life and just have a lot of physical therapy. I just limped along and not really knowing where I was going to go until we ended up moving down from New York to Charlottesville, and my husband's a CPA. Some of you know him. He had a client who interestingly worked in the OR department at UVA, and he was into alternative health, and he shared some of this with my husband. And long and short of it was, my husband had an issue. He was kind of excited, bought a whole bunch of products. These turned up at my house, and I looked at everybody around me and I thought, you're all nutty. I mean, I was not remotely, complementary, alternative, nothing. I mean, as a dancer, it was orthopedic surgeons, PTs, everything very traditional. But watching changes take place in my family, I kind of got a curiosity more than anything, but with a totally skeptical mindset, I started embracing these things. And over time, what happened was my body got better. And I no longer was in that excruciating level of discomfort. I could sleep, I could do things, I could function. And it caught my attention. So that was the beginning of my journey. I'm like, okay, well, if I can heal and I didn't need a drug to do it and the doctors weren't the solution, well, how can I help other people with this? So I started studying all over the place. I was just curious more than anything. I'd already had a background in anatomy and physiology through college, in kinesiology, in performance. And kind of piggybacked off that. And I chose things that fascinated me, and then I would share that information. And some of that started obviously in the nutritional arena. And I still remember going to my first lecture with somebody drawing a cell, healthy cell function, right? Cells not functioning. And now I know what they were showing me was oxidative stress, which is really kind of our whole thing that we talk about. So I shared with people and tried to educate them on how to use things that could help support them. Specifically, I was fascinated by the nutritional pathway. People kept asking me, well, how do you know what you know? And I got kind of fed up with that. So I was like, okay, let's go get some qualifications here so people stop asking me questions, which is where the formal training came in until I navigated through a lot of things. I came to realize some interesting things. I had trained in kinesiology, applied kinesiology, and I would do a lot of testing with nutritional supplements. And one of the things that taught me was that just because you can have a good supplement still doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be right for you. It kind of already proved this unique space that we all exist in as human beings. And I did testing to calibrate how beneficial supplements were, specific supplements were for people. And so I would end up with this database with a tool that actually gave us independent testing rather than me doing applied testing. I don't know if you've done that. People kind of look at you and go, well, you probably push too hard, especially when you're doing that kind of thing. And so I was kind of fascinated to train in a system that meant I didn't have to do that. They actually operated a tool that gave us a measurement level. And by putting supplements under the tongue, you would watch the response of the body, which was really amazing because they were operating this tool. It wasn't me. And they could pull very easily when a resonant frequency of a supplement was good for them. There was a high energetic correlation. And then you could put another supplement under the tongue for testing, and they couldn't even move the bar because it was not good for them. So one of the things that I also came to realize was that whilst we need antioxidants and people gravitate to supplements, antioxidant supplements, too many of them together can work adversely against each other. So you can test and say you find 5 supplements that work beautifully for you, but then you can actually put them together and find that rather like human beings, right? They might be great independently, but then when you put them together, somebody's a party pooper, and you'd actually test and see that the whole thing fell apart. All these things together were not beneficial to the body. And so we'd have to kind of tailor them. So I was already beginning to understand that there was limitations to outcome.
Can I interrupt? Because this has always fascinated me. I've seen it work. I don't really understand it. I did read the book Power versus Force, which was written by an MD, and it's about the resonance of it. But one of the things in energy medicine is that, rather than doing kind of the strength or the balance, you could do a thing where if you held them up against your chest, you could ask like yes or no, but you had to determine what was your yes or no. So is that what you kind of recommend that we do? Because I will be honest with you, I'm like taking handfuls of stuff, so I should be maybe testing to see if it's okay to.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because in my early days, I'd be standing in the supermarkets and testing products out of curiosity. I'd be standing there with them on my chest and doing those kinds of things before I was kind of more sophisticated. But yeah, the body, we are energetic, and this really speaks to where we're in the space of redox. I mean, it's about energetic transfer. Everything communicates, every cell communicates, and we put it on us or under the tongue. Certainly when I was doing testing, we put it under the tongue. The body knows instantaneously. I mean, every cell knows whether this is good or bad for us. And I think that if we're in tune with ourselves, we probably know this anyway, right? You kind of take something or you taste something food-wise and you go, oh no, that's not for me. You may not be thinking about it that way, but I think the body speaks very clearly when we listen. And so there are many ways to do it. But I will say that the questions that you ask and the way in which you ask the question of the body will determine the answer. And I'll give you an example. So I have a lot of, I'm sure you've come across it. So people who are into this kind of testing will often apply this to the Redox technology that we're here to really discuss this evening. And I will say that unless you ask the question carefully, you're not going to get the right answer with Redox. We kind of jumped into where we're at because nutrition is something that we need in different quantities, and we don't always need the same amount of nutrition because our diets are changing. Right? But for me, the space of redox, these redox signaling molecules, which is the language and the operating system of the human body, of every single cell, switching on switches back and forth and transferring communication so that we function, so that we exist at all, is essential, right? It's the platform. We all know that this is more essential than perhaps even oxygen. You know, we can hold our breath for, if we're particularly skilled, for maybe up to 5 minutes, you know, if you've been trained in that, but not for most of us. But you can hold your breath a lot longer than you can exist without redox signaling molecules. So they're really right at the top of the chain of everything else that's happening. So I have, for example, I've got a couple who they actually do chiropractic work by muscle testing. That's their training. So they don't make adjustments unless the body speaks to the need of it. And so they started the product. And the wife was one of those people that had actually bitten into an old-fashioned mercury thermometer many years ago. So she was mercury toxic. She'd been doing detox programs for quite a long time. And because of being in the chiropractic field, they had a lot of assessment tools for them to be able to measure excretory factors. And she was doing, you know, do I need it? Don't I need it? Right? That kind of question that I think most people ask themselves simply. And maybe you've had people who've used Redox, or they take it to a practitioner who's not familiar with it, who does testing, and they go, oh, no, you don't need it, right? And I go, nope, that isn't true. Right? So there's a reason why that's just not true. How much you need might be different when we know that, because the body speaks differently about what it needs. But she was just doing, you know, how many ounces. And I said to her, you know, how we ask the questions of the body is really important to get the right answer, which is true of anything, right? And why is that? Because in all the work that I've done over the years in cancer, when we would do baseline testing for nutritional programs, we would then actually do the tailored version for what they actually needed. So if they tested for, say, 2 capsules, you know, once or twice a day of something, we'd have much higher levels of what they've been given, because therapeutic qualities and quantities within nutrition is very different than baseline maintenance. And in the same way with the redox signaling, when I said to her, okay, tailor your question, because she was going through therapeutic use of it, because she was trying to detox the mercury. And I said, so ask the question, not just do I need, you know, 2 ounces, 4 ounces, 6 ounces, or whatever, until she got an answer from her body, but say, what is my therapeutic need? And she went from 6 to 12 ounces when she asked that question. Body gave her a different answer. And her excretory levels also increased dramatically.
Yeah, clarify that. Is she just asking, or is she holding like 6 ounces or 12 ounces?
No, she can just, you can hold the product against you. So you can hold it on the thymus, right? And we would actually have a tool that designed it so that people could actually pop these things in cups and just hold them against them, so they weren't having to hold multiple bottles, especially when we were testing groups of things together. I kind of got crazy. But you can hold the product so long as you've got enough in it. So, I mean, if you have just 1 capsule in a bottle, that's not necessarily going to be an accurate answer. It'd be better to put it under the tongue. But, you know, if you've got a decent amount, probably half of the bottle is full with those supplements, you can put it against you. And then you can test and keep testing, like 1 ounce, 2 ounces, 3 ounces, 4 ounces, if we're doing liquids, for example, or tablets. And then you'll get a frequency change at the point when something is no longer beneficial, and you'll find, you know, where that point is. So there's a difference between between baseline nutrition and therapeutic quantities. And people don't really realize that labeling that we see on every product, even the Asea products that we have, are based on the guidelines that the government set about the minimum necessary of that element to avoid the disease. But that is not what you need if you're trying to do therapeutic quantities to really move yourself from a deficiency state to an, sufficiency state. That has to be a much higher level. I mean, and one example would just be that an enzyme protocol that we would use for cancer, when I was doing a lot of cancer work, would be that, they might test for 4 capsules, but we'd actually ramp it up. They take probably as many as 15 a day. So long story short, I kind of got into nutrition, but over the years, I realized that my frustration was that, and I'm sure, anybody on here can probably feel the same, may feel the same, but that you're taking lots and lots of supplements, but you don't necessarily get the outcome that you're hoping. And how many people, I'm sure you've done the same, right, can read a life extension magazine with all the fabulous articles that they do on their research. And I say to people, by the time you've got to the end of it, you've found a reason to buy every supplement that they've talked about, but that doesn't mean that you need them. And for me, the big jump was I kept feeling like, what is the missing link? What is this thing that stops people going from this side of the fence to the other side of the fence, the breakthrough that they're looking for, plus a sense of independence? Because I've had people that would come in and we test all of their products, and sometimes they would come in literally with 2 shopping bags full, maybe 40 to 50 supplements, and we'd go through and I go, well, that one's not good for you, and we test. But by then I was testing with scanning systems that were much quicker, and we'd be able to work out what was resonating for them and what wasn't. But you take all these things and you throw a lot of nutrition, which brings us to the point that we have to have an efficient lymphatic system to be able to deliver the nutrients to the tissue in the first place. Now, if we're all sedentary, and how much more sedentary have we become since Zoom, right? But if we're sedentary, if we're not actually actively living an epigenetic lifestyle that promotes health, so deep breathing, making sure we're hydrated, exercising, all of those things, we've got a stagnant lymph system and it becomes gelatinous. It should be nice and free flowing. Right, so it should be like the river carrying the nutrients to the tissue and pulling out the toxins, and it's like that underground highway that gets rid of the junk. But when you get it to become gelatinous, think about that. Picture putting more nutrients onto a gelatinous substance. It's just piling it up. You're actually causing more toxicity by taking overabundance of supplements that your body doesn't have the resources to use. And that's where I stepped into the space of realizing that, was this the missing link with these redox signaling molecules? Because this is not the nutrients, right? It's not the materials, or which is what all of these supplements are, or the food that we eat, but it's the labor. And my journey to that point was my excitement in discovering enzyme therapy, because that is, nobody told me in those days that this is part of this redox function, these redox reactions, but that's what they are, these workers, these catalysts that are necessary for us to be able to use the vitamins and the minerals that we have. And of course, now I come to realize what we're doing with them in the redox space. And this is just beautiful, because when you can upregulate this cell signaling system, you need less of those supplements because you utilize them more efficiently. So, the outcome is entirely different. And that's what I've been able to see in practice over the 6 years of using this, is that instead of 10 supplements that people are throwing at them, now you can really dial down to the key things that we need, because we all need them, right? It's not optional nowadays. When I started in nutrition, kind of late 90s, if you were into new supplements in those days, you were ahead of the curve, right? Because you were more proactive. But, we've got such a deficiency sufficient food source supply now, then it's not even about whether you do organic or otherwise. I mean, there's just the food sources just don't provide what we need. And I think we're massively minerally deplete. And that is a big piece of why, even if sometimes we're building Redox and we don't get the outcome, I think that it's the mineral side of it that we need to look at.
I love that. And maybe we could bring Lee in on this because, you know, he speaks to a lot of this. And in fact, we just skipped right over redox signaling. So, so maybe you could give us a description of what we're talking about and maybe the disclaimer as well. So, and then talk a little bit about the redox life, because I think that's what Carolyn is talking about. And it's so fascinating to me about what else we need to do to get rid of that gelatinous lymph system.
Well, sometimes it's really easy to get off into what we call rabbit holes. We start talking about nutrients and whatnot without understanding what I think is the bigger picture. And so to start with that, we'll just explain to everybody who's listening and viewing this that we're talking about a supplement here. It's regulated by specific laws in the United States as well as all other countries with regard to that we don't make claims. We're not diagnosing, treating, or curing things, that we leave that to the medical doctors and the other licensed health professionals who will provide drugs, which they have to do at times when we don't do our job to prevent having to have medical intervention. There's a difference between intervention and prevention, and that really is the segue into what redox signaling is about. We're talking about how cells function. And when cells function the way they're supposed to, then things turn out better. And when we don't support them well, whether it's nutritionally or other aspects of our lifestyle, then those gene pathways are not activated and they produce disease and dysfunction, which then requires some interventive, usually pharmacological or surgical intervention at that point. And that usually comes down the road a ways. So if we say, well, I just got diagnosed with X, whatever X might be, the reality is you just didn't go to the hospital last week to visit, your sick relative, and you didn't catch diabetes while you were there. This is something that you develop slowly over a long periods of time. And so that's really what we're talking about, is being able to prevent, especially these non-contagious, non-communicable lifestyle-related chronic disease states that occur over time. Certainly genetics has a part to do that with that. But it's when cells don't work like they're supposed to, like they were designed to be able to restore, renew, reset, rejuvenate, DNA repair, making proteins the way they're supposed to, and be healthy, then we have consequences. And this bioavailability, issue with how do we eat foods, how do we intake energy and nutrition and make it the most bioavailable so that we can utilize it and it's not harmful to us. That's an important part of this, as well as what I call being redox clean. We don't want to contaminate that with toxins or processed foods or pesticides or anything that would impair how we utilize our bodies. So Carolyn, you touched earlier on the idea of RDAs and therapeutic dose and bioavailability. Could you take that one step further and talk about what is also a real essential component? Because I know you've got some keen things to say about this, and that is gut health and how your gut health is regulated by your lifestyle, the things you eat, and that impacts your nutritional status as well. Could you go there for a moment?
Yeah, I mean, that piece was fascinating to me. I mean, it kind of caught my attention when it started to be the area that I was studying, and it makes common sense, right? Because if we I often think that people pay more attention to what they put in their car than what we put in the human body. And in some ways, I wish that our body was not so brilliantly adaptable. All the compensatory factors that are going on without us being aware to offset the damage that we are causing by the choices that we make, whether that's smoking, whether that's, poor food choices, dehydration, all of those things, the epigenetic lifestyle, because our choices determine the outcome, right? Well, this is a vehicle, and I don't know if you've ever seen it on YouTube. You can kind of search, for example, how many of us know that, there's different qualities of, we'll know there's different qualities of gasoline for cars, and some work better in some cars than others, right? Just as much as how we vary in the way that the foods respond to us. Some people do better on some kinds of foods than others, because we're slightly unique in that respect. But would we consider it okay to put Coca-Cola in the gas tank of the car and think we're going to get a great outcome, right? And if you actually, if you Google it, you can actually see there's two crazy guys who've tried this out and tested how long will a car run on Coca-Cola. It's kind of fun. I don't know if they're British. I kind of think it might be actually their kind of sense of humor, but you can see they do this. They actually run the car. They fill it with Coca-Cola and they run it. It lasts about 2 minutes. So they film the whole thing, and then of course it just dies, on the spot. Well, what would we do differently if our body was to yell at us that quickly and just, our legs would stop moving and say, I'm not going anywhere. You've been a bad boy. Look what you've done to me. You've just given me that stuff that is not food. We're not designed. You've got to look at what is this model. This model is based on real food. It's not based on anything that's processed whatsoever. So, the moment people, I'm sure you find the same thing, that people are often very careful about some of these things that they buy. They want to do the research into the Redox, and they won't consume it until they've looked at 99,000 studies and, done 15 people's opinions and all of this kind of thing. And yet, do you go into a rest stop on the motorway when you're desperate for a snack and stand there and read all the ingredients on your favorite snack packet and say, well, I want to see all the double-blind studies on those things before I eat them? You don't. People don't, right? But that is not the fuel for the human body. And they say that disease begins in the gut, and I truly believe that that's the case. We produce about 80% of our serotonin in the gut. I know that we often talk about, gut brain health, and the gut is the second brain. I actually think it's the other way around, because if you were neutral and you fed it nothing, then there's nothing to interfere with the brain. But we're giving it stuff all the time, and it's sending messages to the brain, and it's impacting how the brain has to handle the outcome. So it's essential to fuel us with good food. It's essential to recognize, that digestion starts in the mouth. Digestion starts with actually hydration, because if we're dehydrated, when we chew, we can't produce amylase. That comes in saliva, right? And that is the beginning of the digestive process before it gets in the stomach. Digestion isn't just about being in the stomach. The breaking down of the food so that the amylase can attack the carbohydrates in there begins in the mouth. How many of us have parents who told us, chew 30 times before you swallow, right? There's the reason why. And in fact, I'll do this when I do talks on enzymes. I actually have little crackers, and I let people just chew them, and I kind of watch them, and how many times I'm a real people watcher. If I go out anywhere, I'm looking at people and I watch them do chew, chew, swallow. And I go, oh, God, we haven't got much digestion going on there, right? But I watch it, and then I ask them to do it again and then chew that cracker until it becomes a slurry in your mouth. It's really hard to make yourself not swallow something that quickly, right? But it changes. And if you hang in there, you begin to notice the beginning of the digestive enzyme production happening. It changes the quality of what's in there. So that's one stage of digestion. maybe we're not really paying attention to that. So we've already compromised our stomach and given our stomach a lot more work to do. People think that acid reflux means I have too much acid. I'm going to flip it on its head. It actually means that you're no longer producing the acid necessary to adequately digest the food, because we have to go from a resting rate of 6.5 on an empty stomach down to at least a 2, which is pretty acidic, right? If we put a 2 on our hands, it would just burn straight through. But we have to produce that level of acid because it kicks in the different activities of the different enzymes to begin to break down the food. So, bad news, right? You hit 25 and we're already beginning to produce less acid in the stomach. 27, we're beginning to produce less acid in the stomach. So by the time we're 40, why are people always saying, oh, well, I've got digestive problems coming up? It's because that capacity to produce the amount of pH that we need, the acid that we need to break down and trigger the food within that stage within the stomach, isn't going to happen. And we have a laughing fact that we say, when you've got a group of senior citizens in a room together, they haven't got enough pH between them to digest the food. So the challenge is that what does medicine do? Medicine says, oh, well, you've got this carbonic reaction, this fume from putrefaction coming up and causing problems. Let's switch off digestion, right? Let's give you some kind of thing that turns off. How many adverts do you see, take one tablet and, you've got comfort for the next 24 hours from your digestive discomfort? Well, actually, what you've done is switched off the capacity of the body to digest anything. So think about what that is long term. If you're taking those tablets, those acid tablets, you're digesting, which means you're absorbing just about zilch. Think about the cascade of where that goes, because I know that you talk about this. The nutrient deficiency, right, Lee, that we're mentioning here, right? We're no longer being nourished. pH is really important, and I want to speak for a second to. There's a big group of believers that we need to have pH water, alkaline water. You should never drink alkaline water when you need to eat food, because you're diluting the acid in the stomach. So you're inhibiting the capacity of the body to do its job. Now, if you want to drink alkaline water, do it at least 2 hours after you've eaten, when hopefully, you've got a larger percentage of digestion has taken place, or when you've got an empty stomach. But they never go together. That's an important piece to it. pH is actually the resistance, the speed. People love to say, well, I want to be at alkaline because that means that I'm more resistant to cancer, and all of this cancer can't grow in that kind of environment. So there's a big obsession about that. But in fact, actually, what we will see is when I do biological ionization, and I became fascinated because that's the terrain of the human body. And redox plays into that, right? Because if we create a perfect terrain within our cells, we don't provide the environment for bacteria and parasites and everything else, and viruses to populate. So this speaks to what food are we putting in, right? What water are we doing? All of the lifestyle pieces. And actually, when we do testing, both saliva and urine analysis, 6.4 is perfect, not 7. 6.4. And if you're in that 7 range, everything is slowing down. And we see actually alkaline testing is very much goes with all of the fungus and the bacteria and the challenging cellular health issues. So it's terrain that's really important. Start with really good foods. All of the things that can promote probiotics, it's that balance of bacteria, remember, the good and the bad, that need to be in balance. Our biome is great for supporting that. If you want to actually put something in, if you're not really eating the way that we need to eat to support the body, then beneficially support the body with things like the biome, which has 16 probiotics and 3 prebiotics. So that's a fabulous product. It's not what we term a belly bomb with these high colony forming units that can really cause a lot of intestinal distress. It's a perfect balance, but it's the variety that's much more important. And we want to keep that biome within the body in a really good space. So it drives the brain. We know leaky gut, leaky brain, they go together. So if you've got intestinal breakdown, which is going to happen with all of these, undigested, inflammatory promoting foods that we have, you're going to affect the brain. There is nothing you can do about that, right? So if you've got a happy gut, if you've got a healthy gut, you're going to have a happy brain. So they go together. So we got a lot of mood related issues, that are probably seated in the gut. You can't disconnect that. So I just think it's really, it's probably the most important thing, the first place that we can think about what we do in a very cautious way, eat lots of raw foods. Remember that fresher foods have a much different vital energy than a food that's been sitting, on the shelves in the store for goodness knows. And that goes even for organic food. I know that we love to think about organic definitely has better qualities because we don't really want to be ingesting all of these pesticides and chemicals. But if you've got an organic product that was manufactured or grown in Mexico and has spent, the next month traveling to your local shop, you're better off to get something from the local farmer, right? Because that fresh food has a different vital energy to it. And there's where we get into green foods and superfoods. They have a higher energy frequency, which donates to the health of the cell. And, this is the thing. We're about energy, right? We got to provide the cells with energy. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen.
Wow.
Excellent.
This is off topic, but can you speak a little bit to drinking water with lemon juice and ACV in it? I've always been told that helps with digestion and reflux and all.
I think I'm going to sound like my husband, who being a CPA will always say that depends. So, in biological ionization and Reams testing, yes, lemon. So let's start this way. Lemons are the most alkalinizing food that we have. All right, they're a citric acid, but they actually alkalinize. It's the ash, the end product of the food that makes the difference as to whether it promotes acidity or alkalizing. It's the most energetic food. So it's a beautiful thing to use. Yeah. And, creating water with just, 6 or 7 drops of you only need a little bit of lemon juice and a tiny bit of Himalayan Celtic salt in there. And then you've got this, this very receptive water that will be absorbed by the cells in a much better way. But too much of anything is never good for the body. And for me, when we're doing testing, there'll be times when we will say, yes, it's okay to take that. And there'll be times when it's not, based on your pH and based on a whole bunch of other factors. We do Brix analysis, it tells us the sugar level within the human body, but also in the foods. I mean, if you have high Brix testing frequencies in foods, the higher the sugar content in food, the higher mineralization is, higher protein content, and the less the bugs like it. So if you want to grow food bug-free, you got to get the soil right. We're back to the terrain, right? Get the soil right. It'll actually feed, and you'll actually be able to measure the energy of the food with a tester. Now we do this with the urine, and we can actually get a sugar marker, which is going to tell us whether there's a lot of oxygen available for the brain, or whether the oxygen's there but it's not accessible, depending upon what your markers are. And a lot of things like fungus and heavy metals and that cannot be detoxed out of the body if you've got a sugar marker that's outside of 1.2 to 2.0. I mean, you can't do it. So you have to get the numbers right. And it's a bit like juggling hats. It's not just, well, okay, I've got my pH right, so that's good to go. It's not. It's actually like 5 different markers that we go through: nitrogens, ureas, carbs, all sorts of stuff. And this is like a mathematical formula. It's actually beautiful. But when you've got it perfect, then your body's going to be, and I think this is where the redox sits into this space, it's going to help promote the health of the cells to be functioning in the way that they should do. So the answer is yes, it's nice, but I wouldn't go too crazy unless you know a lot about. I mean, I like apple cider vinegar. I think you do have to be cautious though, because again, you know, if you've got a very compromised mucosal lining, you'll probably find that it's not very comfortable to take that because it's too acidic.
Yeah, and yes, and drink it with a straw. So I put it in my mixture of energy and mood. Energy and mind. So it has a little ACV and a little lemon. You just saw me spit out a lemon seed. So yeah, you have to protect your teeth too. So the new grandparents are being awfully quiet or
Well, I was waiting. I enjoyed hearing you talk about the nutrition in the front. And of course, our line, I know you've done a number of other nutritionals prior to Asea's line. So I just love how our products are, they're 100%, whole food. And the redox signaling just makes all of those nutrients work better. I was curious how your thought about, she had just mentioned about self-performance, mixing in I'm drinking mood, how those, since you've gotten to know those since April, how those play a part in even gut health, in hormones, in, things that people don't, they think mind is just for the memory, but it really is for so much other. Maybe you can tip a little bit on our line, what makes it so, remarkable that you don't need all this other stuff. You have the nutrients now from cell performance, you have redox signaling for your cells, and then of course nutrition. So maybe you can tip a little bit on the CP products, since you are new to those as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think across the board, the great thing is that, as I said, I came to learn back in the late 90s that you can have independent products that themselves are good, but then when you put them together, they cross-react and actually promote inflammation. I think the beauty is here that, we have a system that is platformed on the labor and the delivery mechanisms of redox. And then we have done some smart stuff, because I will say I was particularly nervous when they brought out the nutrition, which wasn't here when I first came in on board. And I was thinking, oh Lord, I don't really want to be promoting another company, because I'm an enzyme specialist. I have clinical products that are not things that you just buy over the counter. So I was very pleased to see that they principled this on the basis of it has to be whole food. You get cheap vitamins, you get stuff that's made of synthetic versions, like ascorbic acid is a fake vitamin C, right? It's corn derivative, and it's not the complete vitamin C an acerola cherry would be. So there's a compensation and a downside to that. And I would watch that with taking fake vitamins, cheap vitamins often is, another side of it. And it would be really like pulling from your pantry. If you think of your body as the pantry, the body is actually going to pull the other cofactors necessary to kind of handle this thing that shouldn't be there, right? And in order to get rid of it, so you actually create negative nutrition. So I love the synergy of what they've done, because they've looked at, organic, whole food, non-GMO, all those key things that are important, not soy-based, and with the exception of omega, which is, fish-based, everything is vegan as well. And then we've gone to this other space that really is, more even Lee's specialty of, the redox reactions. And so what we're talking about with the redox signaling and the blue bottle, which you can kind of see on Jim's table, that's pure redox. We're bio-replenishing something that is natively being produced in our cells and that we produce less of from puberty. So, spoiler alert here, that's where aging begins, right? You may not think it, but that's where aging begins. And scientifically, I've looked at stuff that will talk about our metabolism, the energy production of our cells, and the capacity to do everything at a more optimal level peaks around 35 and then starts to tail down. Now, we've already been losing the redox, so we've been losing the efficiency of stem cell function, mitochondria, collagen, all those things that, happen. But we must remember that the wrinkles on the outside are a reflection of the oxidative wrinkling going on the inside. Our organs are not. Don't get away with this, right? They're wrinkling as well through oxidative stress. And the beauty of the redox is that we can bio-replenish. We can rebuild the loss on a daily basis and combat what is an inevitable process of aging, but not to actually have to experience it. I think the key thing is vitality, right? It doesn't matter if you're, you die at 60 or you die at 90, but nobody wants to limp to the end, right? We want to live. And isn't that the point of the value of health? And the prevention, to me, is probably the most powerful statement that we could ever make, because sickness is expensive. And sickness is not just in the dollars that it costs us in your pocket to try to recover, but it's the loss of, being part of your lifestyle, your family, being able to go and do things, maybe to work. I mean, there's all of those things that go with it. There's a big, broad statement to expensive. It's not just about what we feel. So I love this piece that now we're looking at. These are redox signaling molecules, so they're tiny molecules. They are not absorbed, digested rather, in our stomach. If we think about nutrition, we have to put it in, the body has to break it down, and then has to deliver it. And heaven help anybody who's over 27, because it's probably not getting there in the way that they think it is, right? There's a big, long hurdle between the mouth and actually getting to the tissue. So people can take things but not get it there. But this stuff is so cool because we put it in the mouth, and because it is actually activated by us, it's already signaling. So this is absorption in the mouth and the bilingual, sublingual, not bilingual, sublingual pathways. It's already signaling. And then what that does, because we're in this electron transfer chain, we're actually moving energy around. It's going to switch on and off switches, which give instructions. And then it's like this beautiful cascade that kind of goes all over the place, depending upon what's necessary. And there's the tricky point, right? Because we can't say, you are going to go here and you're going to work on my creaky knees, right? And it gets in there and it goes, no, I'm not going there. You've got to come in and you don't even know yet. And we're going to go there and we're going to work on that. But it is absorption. Now we come into this space of those signals create redox reactions naturally, but we're now pivoting with the cell performance. I don't actually have the packets with me, so maybe one of you could hold them up. Now we're looking at nutraceuticals and botanicals that are all meeting standards, which say there are 4 areas that redox function needs to cover: genetic signaling, cytoprotection, repair, replace mechanisms. Well, I can't remember. I kind of gone blank on those things. You can fill us in there, Lee. But, we have this baseline that says, let's consider these botanicals and nutraceuticals that must fit at least 2 out of the 4, if not all of them, before we'll even consider them. And then from there, the brilliance is, let's look at the science behind these. And then let's formulate, again, the synergy, right? Like I was saying about testing and finding you put things together, and when they're together, they work against each other. They're looking at the synergy of how they create an even bigger impact. And now we go to these bigger molecules that are digested, but are put together in such a beautiful way that it's like a lock and key mechanism. They find a spot on the cell, and they lock in there, and then they create this targeted redox reaction. And so the yellow ones are for energy, right? Being able to energize and produce more redox support within the cell in a sustained manner. We know so many things on the market where people push up, you get the high P up and then you crash. And that's the beauty of this, is that we're working on how's the actual cell produce energy in a real way, not a fake way. And that's sustainable energy. And then we have the mind that, as you mentioned, is beautiful, because this has all these incredible ingredients in there that are designed to improve focus, attention, memory in the short term. So if you need to be able to be much more on par and on point, you can do it quickly with this and get the feel of it. But also, is the beauty of it, it is long term as well, right? It builds this neuroprotective improvement for the long haul. And I know it's like that, and the energy and my coffee go-to. I don't drink coffee now.
Oh, yeah.
I put those together actually in warm water, and that's the first thing I have in the morning. I like warm drinks, but Yeah, I never drank coffee because it kept me up and awake. I could drink it, at midnight and go to bed 2 minutes later and go to sleep. So that was never a benefit. But the final one is the mood. And I when we were beta testing these, I don't know about you, I kind of looked at it and I went, well, mood, well, I'm not that kind of depressed person, I don't need that kind of elevation. But we were beta testing them. So I was like, okay, I'll take, try it. And I tried them independently. I found the beauty of this is that I think does it help with traditional mood challenges? And yeah, absolutely. But I think the beauty is how many people are stressed in this day and age. Right. And we all know that stress is at the base of, causing all sorts of disease. It creates oxidative stress, right? Oxidation causes disease, disease creates oxidation, goes round. So I found that it was really helpful if I've got an incredibly busy day and I'm feeling a little pushed to get everything done. I could just kind of take the sense of overwhelm out. And it was like this beautiful sense of clarity, calmness. And then you add it with the things like the energy and the mood, the energy and the mind, and you actually get sustained fuel, right? You get absolute focus and you get this clarity of calmness there, which is really beautiful. So I love that. That again is also a long-term beneficial product as well as in the short term. So they're powders. We just drink them in water. You can mix them together as you realize, or you can take them independently, drink them like in about 15 minutes. And, they're just this beautiful output of this new look of how do we take this science of redox? And we haven't kind of mentioned the fact that we're the only people in this field. What we have here is not only patented and proprietarily protected. Nobody else had done what we've done back in 2007. They still haven't done what we've done. There's nobody working in this space. And we know so much because of all the R&D that we're putting into it. So we're now broadening the platform. And so somebody said, yes, what are thoughts about distilled water? Distilled water, I love distilled water, actually has the highest pH potential hydrogen properties. So it actually is really good, especially if you're not well. But yeah, so I would speak to all of those. We're learning a lot more. We all kind of had a little huddle earlier because there's some new science that I think the company is going to be releasing that we know about other things that this is going to be beneficial for. So, but I don't think we're able to talk about it yet.
Okay. I want to back up a little bit. The first part of this call kind of went up here for me. We don't need to be doing any kind of testing for people to take this. Okay, I want to make that abundantly clear. No confusion here. Carolyn, who needs this?
Everyone.
Okay, so how do you determine how much they need?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, and then that was my point, is that when I have people who say, well, they want to test it, don't test it, because you know what? It's essential to life. And at 15, we start losing it in the subject, right? We all need it. If you've got, no, I don't want to be rude here, but to me, that kind of makes, right? To me, if I've got something that's essential for me to function at an optimal level, and I'm going to naturally lose it because it's the built-in arc of aging, and somebody says to me, like my car, oh, you've got a gas station down the road now, so instead of just one tank of gas for the rest of your life, you can go refill up. I'm going to go refill up, right? Because I want the prevention piece. We all know we felt healthier when we were younger. We recovered much quicker. We healed much faster. We looked different because we were abundantly supplied with redox signaling molecules. So therefore, let's help our body feel that way. So how do we know what to take? Kind of generic guideline here. And I think this is the product we might call the sleep number bed, right? We're all going to find our unique number because that is going to be determined by demand and supply. What's your demand going to be? I don't know. It's going to be a bunch of factors that you'll bring to the table. Age, genetics, lifestyle. Have you got a chronic challenge? How long have you had it? What are you doing to help your health? All of those things mean that our personal demand number is very unique. So therefore, how much do we have to supply to combat the accumulated damage and disease and inflammation that's gone on over the years and caused chaos and aged us or created, real challenges? I don't know. So here's the guideline. 2 ounces twice a day. Start that way, right? For 7 days. Benchmark everything about your health, not just the main thing that you're thinking about, literally everything, your skin, your health, your digestion, your sleep, your libido, your energy, whatever, take photos of yourself. At the end of 7 days, about 10 to 15% of people will see something shift. Does that mean that's your big deal? No. All right. Because health disease didn't arrive overnight. So please don't come to this or anything in the nutritional arena with a magic bullet mindset, right? You didn't get there in 7 days. It's not all going to go away in 7 days. It might not even go away in 3 months. In natural health, we believe it's a baseline of 3 months because you've got about 75% of blood work's changed once. Right. And then it's actually 1 month for every year that you've had some problem to fully retrace and get to real healing. Does that mean you'll feel it before? Of course you can feel it before, but the real process of complete restoration. So 7 days, at the end of 7 days, if you see nothing, my recommendation is do what we do in the clinical trials, double it to 8 ounces a day. Yeah. All right. Fire hose the system, right? We've got a loss. We have an amount of damage that we need to deal with, and we need to supply the troops to get on top of that and help get some remedy a little quicker, especially if you're impatient. I love everybody to do at least 2 months on 8 ounces, which is our clinical study for our genetic testing study, where we have 100% of people who did the 8 ounces for 2 months had a uniform improvement of 20 to 31% of genetic signaling improvements. They were 35-year-olds who didn't feel like there was anything wrong, but blood's already showing them their genetic signaling was turning off, which is why I talk about that 35 point. But that improved genetic signaling pathways for your immune system, inflammatory system, cardiovascular health with vein elasticity, hormone signaling and vitality, and digestive enzyme production. That's the bullseye. It's in there somewhere, right? Doesn't matter what you've got. It's certainly in the first two, right? Immune system and inflammatory system. That applies to everything. So to me, it's foundational. 8 ounces for 2 months, 100% of people had these 20 to 31% improvements. And interestingly enough, just the plain salt water, which is why we can nix all of those statements about this is just salt water, right, was a 0% improvement in the placebo. Mm-hmm. So I like people to do that, at least that, but then kind of play around with it, see what you need. Some people need larger quantities, non-toxic, right? Clinical studies, totally non-toxic. Some people who are really sick will drink a whole bottle a day because they need a larger number of troops. Can't be allergic to it. It's in us at the moment. Otherwise we'd face plant. We wouldn't be alive. And it's also really interestingly transparent to medication. So that's beautiful because if you're on meds, you can stay on meds, add this, benchmark and watch the changes, Yeah.
Hey, Dr. Osler, is it possible for this to not work on anything alive, or does it always work every time?
Well, even the dead people that are walking around, it'll work on. So it always works. We have a drug mindset in our culture that, if I have a headache, I'm going to take some aspirin, and I fully expect that it's going to work, meaning my headache's going to go away, within 30 to 60 minutes. And we kind of have that as our standard of how we evaluate things that we take. And so I always counter with the thing, if you're taking vitamins and supplements, when you take vitamin C, can you feel a difference? And it's like if your blood pressure were to go up, 10 points, or your blood sugar were to go up 10 points, would you be able to feel the difference? And the answer is no. And even if it went down, you wouldn't feel the difference either. Mm-hmm. And so my point is, we have to be careful when we're talking about an absorbed molecule that has a cascading effect that turns on and off the regulatory circuits of our body. We have to be fair to the science and realize that it is working at that subcellular level. We may not feel it, but we might. And certainly, I would not take it away from anybody. I would hope that they would feel it. I would love it when they feel it. I went 18 months without feeling it. And then I decided to do what Jim did and double my dose. And then all of my back discomfort just stopped. So I hadn't even myself had found, the right dose, because I hadn't really thought that through for myself. So we have to be careful there that we're, as Carolyn was saying earlier, that we're not shortchanging ourselves by assuming things that really aren't consistent, with what it is we're talking about.
Real quick, Carolyn, we've got 1 minute. We can go a little bit over, but okay, talk about the taste, because I want people to understand, because it's not going to taste the same to everybody. And then could you mention, like Dr. Carmen Keith has talked about, that if you do drink more, you're going to be having a bigger broom to clean out your garage, kicking up more dust. You're going to have some potential cleansing, we should say, of the body. Can you touch on that real quick, the taste and then the potential detox?
So it's not really a taste, it's actually a smell. It's an olfactory smell. All right, it's the chloride in the sodium chloride, hydrogen, and oxygen. It's the chloride that we can smell, but it reminds us of pool water. So lots of people think it's kind of funky water, but I think it's a beautiful barometer, because the stronger the smell, the more of an indicator that you have a lot more oxidative stress, a lot more damage disease, and you're more out of redox balance. And so that changes. It can change in a day or two. It might take a week or more. It just depends upon where you're at and how much you take, how quickly you want to get through that. This detox thing, cells are supposed to take in nutrients and get rid of junk in the same way that we should clean out the garbage in our house, right? Our house loads up. It's not a place, it's a happy place, and we want to get it out. When we activate cells to start to do what they've stalled out on, right? And if they're unhealthy, they're not doing that, which is why we don't feel optimally energized and we're not operating at our best. When we start to open that up, we're clearing out the garbage. And sometimes that, if we're very toxic, or if you've been on a lot of medication, that can feel a little hard, right? Key thing I get is make sure that you drink a lot of water before your product arrives, right? And make sure you're drinking one, because you want to flush this out, and it comes out through the lymphatic system and through the, peeing it out. So just make sure that you keep water. But if you're feeling like the effects, which is really a lot less, I find, than most products, I mean, really, it's not a big deal for a lot of people. But if you're feeling any of the kind of effects of cleaning out, which could be achy joints, a bit of a headache, feeling exhausted, it's a sign your body's doing the work. So clap hands and be glad and help it through that. And you have two choices. Do you want to get through it quickly, or do you want to take a slower pace to it? And if you're not willing to go with the quickly and feel uncomfortable for a short time and move everything on and be the other side of things and feel great, take it slower. That, you didn't get into this disease space in 2 days. So you don't have to move out of it in 2 days. Just reduce the amount that you're drinking and titrate it through, but just know that it's working the moment it's in you.
Okay, and one last question. Is there anything negative that can happen when you start drinking the Asea or drink a little bit more? Is there anything negative or bad that can happen to your body?
Redox molecules are designed to promote health and find bad things and solve the bad things. So it can't create any problem, right? Does that mean you'll necessarily feel good? The only caveat I would have is if you're on blood pressure medication, those are the people that I start slower, because I do find that they're often a little bit more toxic. And if we're cleaning the cells out, it's like an overcrowded corridor, right? We can sometimes see a little bit of elevation in the blood pressure, so we don't want that. So they're the people that need to drink, and I would titrate them in with 1 ounce for 3 days and then 2 ounces for 3 days and just move it up slower. And the other one would be if you're on blood sugar medication, I would ask that you would take your blood sugar markers every day, because if you're supplying additional redox and your pancreas suddenly says, oh, I've got resources, I can start to get back to work and produce more insulin, you don't want to be giving yourself to more insulin than your body needs. And if you see your numbers shift, go talk to your doctor about that, and they may well tell you what so many people tell us is like, well, my doctor made an adjustment and I'm no longer on meds, or I'm not on as many. So
beautiful.
Nice.
Well, thank you, Dr. Carolyn.
Bye so fast.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be back. We had a wonderful trip to Salt Lake City, got to stop by home office. I forget who our guest is next Friday. Maureen, do you remember who it is?
No, nobody special.
He's famous.
Nobody?
It's our beloved, our absolutely beloved Dr. Lee Osler. So you know what? It'll be like a book club next week. Order
Yeah.
your book, get started on it, and we'll talk about it next week. It's fantastic. And Carolyn, thank you. Wonderful. I learned so much
Yes,
from you.
appreciate you.
And we already have people asking for you to come back. So
We never
Always.
talked about how this helped me transition out of a brick and mortar practice, right? When COVID closed down the practice, I didn't even have to go back to that. So,
Yeah.
You know, we're
Remember you changed
Carolyn,
me.
we're going to do a show on that actually, probably within the next month, talking about that exact thing. And I do want to bring up that Jerry Yerke will be with us next Friday talking about what I believe to be one of the most important pieces that Lee has written, why it matters. Don't miss next week. That's all I want to say. This is absolutely phenomenal. It may not draw as much interest, but it should. This should be an immediate bestseller because everybody needs to be aware of the basic principles that are in here.
Yeah. That's a
Right.
great
So,
one.
Lee, thank you for
Thank you,
another gift.
Lee. We appreciate
Thank
you,
it.
Carolyn.
stress is financial. So yeah.
fun to
So-
be with you.
Thanks,
Glad to be
Carolyn.
here. We'll have to show up and within the hour or so at redoxmatters.com.
Yeah.
You can always go there to get not only that, but other recordings and some of Dr. Walker and Dr. Osler's materials are there under some of the other videos. And Lee has also done another gift by doing some of the short takes, which are smaller clips that you can use to share and send out to people for giving them information about the single greatest gift that we have ever been given. And it's not just the health benefit. For us, it was the financial benefit. Same thing like with you, Carolyn.
And it's also on Facebook, Asea United. So you can go
Yes.
in there for people that are part of that group. If they're an associate, they can join that group, and then you can tag them and watch it right there. You don't all
So-
have to go to the .com to
But
get an immediate.
yeah, but on Redox Matters, you can copy and,
Yes.
and share that.
Right.
So with
Both
someone
ways
that's
you
not
could
part
go
of the
if
ACA.
you
So
don't-
guys, thank you so much. God bless.
Good night, everyone.
Nice being
Bye.
back. Thanks, Carolyn.
You're
welcome.
God bless
Next week.
everybody.
See ya.
See you next week.
See you next
everybody.
week.
Bye,
Thank
Carolyn.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.